Hey there, this is Zachary McDonald with Next Home Envision, and today I'm going to teach you the 7 mistakes to avoid when making your first investment. Hey there, so when we jump into these tips and everything we're going to talk about, I just want to remind you before we get started that as a beginner you get really worried about putting pressure and on the situation and what's going to happen at this, that, and the other, all of this craziness. I just want you to remember that investing is simple. The rules are simple, and we're going to outline some of the things that are important for you so that you can move forward with confidence. But the important thing is to remember that investing is simple, and keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated or crazy. Now, the first thing is a lot of investors making this mistake is overestimating cash flow and underestimating expenses. It's very important to be conservative with your calculations. Don't get all foaming at the mouth over the numbers and craziness. When you really just need to be honest with the numbers, look at what is around, comp out properties, make sure there's at least 3 to 5 properties when you're comping out rental, or you're comping out what the ARV might be, and all these different things. Just make sure that you have enough to prove it, to prove your numbers, and don't get too crazy with, well, I could cut cost here, I could do this, or I could do that, and all this wonderful stuff that we do as, again, making it too complex. Now, number 2, a lot of investors make the mistake by not putting in the reps, okay?
The little girl's gym is right across the street.
Investing is a mind game, is a mental game, and like any muscle, it requires reps. It requires practice, and that's how you first understand the cash flow, understand the expenses, but when you make the reps is how you avoid the first mistake. So you see how there's certain mistakes that are going to be piggybacked off each other. You're going to see that throughout, but some of them will be independent. Now, number 3, don't get attached to the deal. This is something that is very popular. A buyer will fall in love with a house.
Wow, I love that backsplash. That backsplash is amazing.
Well, that backslash is so amazing. Maybe I could charge $50 per month more in rent because of just that backsplash. No. We have to go with the real numbers, the things that are actually important. Something like backsplash, no matter how much you love it and no matter how pretty it is, that's a little prime example. And maybe in your market, maybe I'm crazy, maybe in your market this is what you think is true, and it might work for you, but here's the reality of it. You always want to run with your low numbers and don't get attached to the deal. Don't fudge the numbers because you just think, oh, this pretty backsplash, or ooh, this pretty trim. All those things need to be taken into consideration, but you always need to stick to the numbers. And again, getting attached to the deal often happens because you don't put in the reps. So you see these are little piggyback tips here. Now, number 4 is that a lot of investors don't have enough reserves, okay? I would recommend a 3-month minimum of your expenses. So if you're doing a long-term rental, an expense is generally just gonna be your mortgage. Now, if you pay utilities for your renters or whatever it is, your situation, whatever your month-to-month expense is, you need to have at least 3 months of it. And to add on to that, to be the way I do things personally, and again, this is a personal preference, I will not take cash flow on a property. That means any money that I make, I'm not gonna spend it or do anything with it until I have at least 6 months built up. So that means maybe I'll come in with 3 months of reserves, but then I'm gonna continue to save my money until I have 6 months. And 6 months to me is a really nice and round number. That's just a great way when you get more and more properties that you can be comfortable with basically lowering that number as time goes by. Maybe you only need, 4 months because you have 4 properties, and not all the properties are going to go, have all these problems at once. But the reality is, for starting your first deal, just come in with 3 months. You really should save your cash flow until you have 6. Just my advice. Take it or leave it. Now, number 5, and this is a funny one. Don't overpay. Now, you may be like, okay, that's obvious, that's simple, whatever. Of course, this market's so crazy. How can we not overpay, or all these things like that? All these limiting beliefs that come at you, and you're just, throwing at yourself, blah, blah, blah. But overpaying is not just market price, okay? Personally, myself, there are properties I've seen that I'd be willing to pay way over market price. I'm talking about $30,000, $40,000 over the market price, because I know how it will perform in rent or whatever it is, and the income it produces outweighs the market value of it. So that being said, on the flip side, you can buy things at market value and then them not perform as good rentals. This is why I typically advise my clients and people I work with to not buy super duper large houses, because really big houses are generally expensive, but the rent is not necessarily proportional to that, okay? And for a really quick example, a 3-bed, 2-bath, maybe 1,500 square feet, will generally rent in my market anywhere from $1,600 to $1,900 depending on the amenities, versus a humongous house, let's say over 2,500 square feet, over $400,000, will rent anywhere from $22,000 to maybe $3,000 if you really get the right tenant in there. But my issue with that is you're generally going to be anywhere from $22,000 to $2,500. So you're going to get 2 asset classes. You're going to pay a lot of money for something, a lot more money for something that's bigger, but it's not going to rent for double, even though you're paying double for the asset. Does that make sense? Let's continue. Now, that being said, number 6 is understanding the risk. Now, risks come in lots of different ways, and as investors, we have to always be comfortable with some level of risk. But in this specific way, when I'm describing this is actually very market specific to Southern Maryland, and a prime example that I'm trying to outline in this is something like in a suburban or Southern Maryland market where you have things like septic and well. You need to understand that those things should be inspected so that you can ensure that you're not going to have a lemon on your hands.
Unacceptable condition!
Because let's say, for example, you buy a beautiful house, it's got brand new finishes, everything's beautiful, but the septic fails, you have no house because you can't live in the house without a working septic. So you need to understand your market, what specifically matters to you or not, or what's important to you. Maybe you don't want roofs that are shot. So this is when we go back to your reserves and things like that. So these sort of mistakes are what investors don't really plan for. So as we understand, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So just understand the risk, identify them, and accept them, or decide you're going to change your target of what's important to you. Maybe you don't want to buy houses that have septics and wells. Maybe you only want to do public water, public sewer. Just something to think about. Now, number 7 is one of the biggest things for anybody that's came through this whole list and overcame a lot of these mistakes. Number 7 is what keeps most new investors tucked away, cuddled up in their bed on a warm pillow, and just scared to ever jump into the game, is analysis paralysis. It's this idea that you worked out all the numbers, you worked out all the ins and outs, and you solved every problem theoretically, but you haven't jumped in with both feet. You never made an offer. You never made you never made a reasonable attempt at a property or whatever it is. That's your aligning principle. But you need to break away from that. You need to understand that the cost of your inaction is what we define as opportunity cost. And opportunity cost may be outweighing the potential mistakes or errors that you fear that you'll be making. So, with that being said, let's revisit the topic when I said keep it simple. Define keep it simple. Define your rules of thumb for me, there's specific principles that matter to me. It's cash on cash, return on investment, right? So that's one thing. Then it's cash flow. And then depending on how much money I have to spend, it's my all-in budget. So for example, when I did my first deal, it was a house hack, and I had, X amount of dollars to play with. So I had to find a deal that I could do my 3.5% down for my FHA plus, a little bit more for closing. And then I needed to make me a certain amount of money so that I could either live for free or make money or make money on my house. And then I wanted to say, okay, once I stabilize this asset and I'm not in this property anymore and I'm renting it out, how much money is it gonna make for me? Now for me, a lot of these numbers are generally something like more than 8% cash on cash return. And then my cash flow, I usually want after a lot of my predicted expenses, which I usually rough in to be 25%. So 25% is going to include all these different things like vacancy, capital expenditures, maintenance and repairs, and then property management. After that 25% is subtracted, I like to try to make $200. So that's a principle. These are good principles to base your knowledge on, base which you're really going to go, okay, keep it simple. Does it meet this? Does this meet this? No, move on. Does it meet this? Does it meet this? No, move on. And see, this is where you come in, the reps come in. It's where you're looking at properties, you're estimating things, and a really good piece of homework is just to go analyze 10 properties a week, whether you don't ever want to buy them, whether you have the money to buy them, or whether you don't. Just jump into it and get comfortable with running the numbers so that you can define when a deal is really good, when it actually is good. Not just because you like the backsplash. You see what I'm saying? And my bonus tip is always be learning. Don't think you have it figured out. If you're a newbie and you read 10 books, if you're an experienced investor and you've done 10 deals, always be learning, always be leaning on new team members and new people that are in your sphere of influence and that come into Facebook groups, or you see them on Instagram in your market and they're doing great things. Always find a way to bring value to those people, but always find a way to try to see if you can learn from those folks. So I hope this helped. I hope this gave you at least, I guess you say 8 tips to help you as a new investor to avoid making the rookie mistakes. Hope you enjoy this. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy this, or share this with a friend if you really, really thought it brought value. Thanks.